Hello everyone, welcome to my movie review of Superman 2025. Let's take a look at the good and the bad of this superhero movie, and at the end, give you a proper score for this movie.
Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing good. Hope you all are doing happy, doing safe, and just doing overall well. So, as I'm setting up my streams and getting everything ready to start streaming again in the fall, I get a very pleasant surprise when Superman 2025, the most recent Superman movie that came out this past year, dropped onto HBO Max. And I am going to give you a review of it, okay? But just to kind of lay the groundwork for you, this movie is meant to be the first movie in the new DC universe, what they're calling Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters. In fact, that title, Gods and Monsters, is in the movie. Superman is not named Superman Gods and Monsters, but it does mention Gods and Monsters in the movie, okay? And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But it was directed by James Gunn. You've got James Gunn writing it, and they have Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster as writers on it because they did create Superman. And it does have a runtime of about 2 hours and 10 minutes, and it has two post-credit scenes. One scene that happens immediately after the movie, and another scene that happens towards the end of the credits. Okay? And just some of the most notable people who are playing in this movie. You got David Corenswet as Superman. You got Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, and I know I'm butchering that name. And you got Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. You also have Nathan Fillion playing as Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern. Let's take a look at this movie, and I'm just going to give you some of my overall thoughts and opinions on it. Now, before I really get into this review, before I really tell you what I liked and did not like about this, I don't want to spoil you, okay? You know, I know that people hate spoilers. They hate people spoiling the movie for you. So, I am giving you fair warning right now that this review will probably have spoilers on it. So, I will include this picture. When you see this picture, just know that there are spoilers involved in this review. Okay, when this picture goes away, then you don't have to worry about spoilers anymore. But there will be spoilers in this review from this moment forward. So please, if you don't want to be spoiled, go over to HBO Max and watch it. Buy it off Amazon Prime. But from this moment forward, there will be spoilers. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Spoilers from this moment forward. You've been warned. So let me start off with this. Depending on how you come into this movie, you will either like this movie, not love this movie, like this movie, or you won't like this movie. Okay? This is one of those movies where, depending on your point of view and how you're coming into this movie to watch it, will determine whether or not you like it or hate it. Okay? If you come into this movie as a hardcore Superman fan, as someone who loves Superman, who knows the lore and all that, you will not like this movie, okay? If you just come into this as a average moviegoer who just wants a good movie, something to escape for a few hours, then you'll like this movie. Not love it, like it, okay? But let me start off with what I did like about this movie, okay? So first off, I like the acting, okay? Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, Superman, Jimmy Olsen. I thought they did a great job on all these characters, okay? Whether you're talking about Lex Luthor and just his evilness, how he values brains over brawn, okay? Or Lois Lane, who at this point knows that Clark Kent is Superman, but is still trying to find her own equilibrium with just having a relationship with Clark Kent, on top of the fact that she's dating an alien, okay? So there's that whole situation going on. And then you got Superman, and I'm just going to be honest with you. In this movie, Superman is at his lowest than I've ever seen him, okay? he is at his absolute lowest in this movie. Okay? And it's because of several factors. The first being Lex Luthor, basically using, social media to bring him down, to spread false rumors about him. Then it's about the message, the message that was sent with him to Earth, okay? And how towards the end of the movie he finds out the truth of that message, okay? And how it completely changes things for him, okay? It's about finally being defeated, okay? It's about finally, facing the agony of defeat, okay? And having to, just claw your way back from that, okay? And I thought all the characters in this were done good, okay? They were done really well, okay? And the movie has a great mix of action and comedy. One of the funniest moments that made me laugh, especially if you know of the internet and stuff, was the moment where Lex Luthor showed all these monkeys just typing hateful messages about Superman over on social media. And it was basically a shot across the bow to all the trolls on the internet who all they do is just spew hate. It was a shot across their bow where basically they are brainless idiots, monkeys, whatever you want to call them, just typing hateful stuff over on the internet. Okay? And that's literally all these monkeys were doing. There was just rows and rows of these monkeys just typing hateful stuff on the internet, on social media. And basically Lex said it. He said, these are my, hateful trolls, I think is what he called them. These are my hateful trolls just spreading my hate across the internet. Okay? And literally all it is just monkeys tied to some type of device that will literally let them type on the internet just hateful messages about Superman. Okay? Overall, I think the action and comedy in this movie was done really well and made good balance for the movie. Okay? Obviously, with it being a superhero movie, there's going to be action in it. Okay? But they used the comedy as a way for you to kind of catch your breath, have a good laugh, maybe, connect with some of the other characters like Perry White, Jimmy Olsen, and then get back into the action, okay? So it is a good mix of action and comedy throughout this entire movie. Another thing is they introduced some of the core members of what would become the Justice League. Now, in this movie, they're not called the Justice League. They're called the Justice Gang, okay? And they're funded by opponent of LexCorp. At this point, they're called the Justice Gang, okay? And they are made up of Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern Guy Gardner, Hawk Girl, and towards the end of the film, you see Metamorpho, okay? Kind of not officially become a member of the Justice Gang, as it's called at this point. But you see him becoming, instead of a captive of Lex Luthor, becoming a hero in his own right. Okay? So, it did provide a good vehicle by which to introduce these characters, Not many people know about Mr. Terrific, unless you watch the CW show Arrow. Not many people would know about Mr. Terrific. Most people, when they think of Green Lantern, they think of John Stewart, not Guy Gardner. A lot of people know of Hawk Girl, but have never seen a real live-action Hawk Girl before. Okay? And not a whole lot of people know about Metamorpho. Okay? So, yeah. I mean, it has a perfect vehicle right here for introducing the Justice League. Now, like I said before, because they are being funded by Maxwell Lord, a opponent of Lex Luthor and his company, they're not called the Justice League at this moment. They're called the Justice Gang. Okay? So, yeah, it is. This movie is really introducing the first inkling of what will become the Justice League later on. And finally, what I liked about this movie was it had a lot of Easter eggs for the DC Universe. First off, you see the Hall of Justice being built, okay? In the movie, you actually see them constructing what will become the Hall of Justice. Just like we've seen in cartoons and other forms of media. Okay, you see it being built, even though it's only these three members. Well, later on, four and probably five with Superman and Mel Morpho joining in. You see the Hall of Justice being created. Okay, you see so many Easter eggs to the DC universe. Mel Morpho being another one. Okay. I mean, at the very beginning of the movie, it kind of lays out the groundwork for what the movie will, basically the lore of the movie, okay? Where it says, 300 years ago, gods and monsters appeared on Earth called metahumans. 30 years ago, a baby was sent to Earth and became Superman. And then 3 minutes ago, he had his first, he has first defeat. Okay. So at the very beginning of the movie, not only is it setting up the lore for the movie, it's setting up the lore for the DC universe. Okay. So yeah, this movie does have some good points to it. Okay. When I came into this movie, I had heard so much about, I thought, okay, this movie is going to be absolutely horrible. And I'm not going to tell you how it's going to be horrible yet, okay? I'll talk about that next. But there were some good points concerning this movie that I will admit did surprise me a little bit. And I did enjoy this movie on some aspects, okay? But then there's the bad stuff. And just to be honest with you, the bad stuff really does outweigh the good stuff. Now let me talk about what I didn't like. And I'm just going to be honest with you. If many of these things had not happened in this movie, this could have been a great movie, okay? But there's a few of these items that really, really got my goat and really calls into question the rest of the DCU, okay? Because remember, this movie is meant to be the first part of what they're calling Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. Okay? And in fact, that's in the movie. Okay? At the very beginning, you see an explanation of what's happened, and it says Gods and Monsters in it. Okay? And many of these aspects really call into question what's next for the DCU, especially in how they're going to treat Wonder Woman and Zatanna and Batman and the other things. Okay? The first of these is, in my opinion, they went and they altered a key foundation of the Superman lore. When Superman was sent to Earth, okay, when he was sent to Earth, he was sent with a message. In every iteration of Superman, that message was a message of hope. It was a message of goodness. It was a message from two loving parents who not only knew that their way of life was ending on Krypton, but also knew that they could save their son by sending him to this planet that not only had the potential to do all the good Krypton had done, but also all the bad. Okay? And that's why they did it. They sent Superman, Kal-El, to Earth to A, survive the destruction of Krypton. B, to be a guiding light for humanity to not make the same mistakes that Krypton made. Okay? And to help guide humanity forward. But in this movie, they, even though it's small, they've altered a key point in that I truly believe was the guiding light of Superman's purpose. Okay? Was really the first brick on the road to him becoming Superman. And if you take that brick out, then the whole road collapses. So in the movie, Superman has this message from his parents. And he can only read half of the message, the first half of the message. Halfway through, Lex Luthor gains access to the Fortress of Solitude, and the female woman he calls the engineer, who has nanotechnology in her body, hacks Superman's Fortress of Solitude computer and gets the message. And I don't understand, and that's another thing I really don't understand, is how she could understand the message when he couldn't, when his androids couldn't. But somehow, some way, she hacks in, she gets the message, and somehow she's able to, redo it. Okay? She's able to reconstruct the entire message. The final part of the message states that Superman was sent to Earth to breed with as many women as possible so that way Kryptonian blood would continue and then one day rule over Earth as New Krypton, essentially. Okay? They took a message that was a message full of hope and love and benevolence, and they completely changed it into a message of darkness and war and ruin. Okay? And by extension, changing his origin story from one of light into one of darkness, in my opinion. Now look, there are heroes in the DCU that have that origin. Batman being the biggest example. His parents were murdered, and he chose the darkness so that way no one would ever have to go through what he went through. But this is completely different. Superman's always been a hero of light. He's always been a benevolent hero. And by them doing this, they completely changed not only his purpose on Earth, but his possible path going forward. Now, at the end of the movie, he makes a choice of either being Kryptonian and human. Okay? And at the end of the movie, you see that choice. He sees videos of him growing up with his human parents. But now that thought's in his head that he could rule over these people, that he could go out and breed with as many women as possible and continue the Kryptonian blood. And there was nothing in it about not making the same mistakes they did. It really, really ticked me off. Okay? This movie, if they had not done that, okay, anything else, really, that and one other thing, I'll talk about that here in a minute. But if they had just not done two things, this movie would have been higher up on my scale. Really, it would have been higher up. But that was the first thing that really ticked me off. Okay? Really ticked me off. And also called into question the rest of the DC universe. Really called it into question about what they're able to do in the DC universe. Now, I will say this. The way it was done with the engineer, I think they were leaving themselves open to perhaps retcon it in maybe a sequel. And we now know they are doing a sequel called Superman Man of Tomorrow. Okay? So I am hoping that the fan base will shout and scream loud enough to where they do retcon it in the sequel. Okay? But as of right now, as of September 2025, okay, that move that they did, that which they did, was wrong, and it completely alters the Superman mythos going forward. Because now it's going to be in his head that he has the capacity to do that. And, you're always, now every decision he makes is going to be questioned. Not just by the people who are living in this world, but by the audience. Okay? And I really don't think that should be an issue. Okay? I really don't. The second thing that really did it for me. Alright, that really, I hated it. I hated them doing this. And after watching it a couple of times, I can kind of see where they're going with this. Okay? I can kind of look at it and maybe see where they're going with this. But they could have done it a whole lot better. At the very end of the movie, Superman's healing inside the fortress. And Supergirl comes in. She is stone drunk. On the verge of being blackout drunk. Okay? She's there to collect crypto. Okay? This is the first appearance of Supergirl in the DC universe. In this new DC movie universe. Okay? Our first appearance of Supergirl should not be as her walking into the Fortress of Solitude blackout drunk. Our first description of her from Superman should not be that she goes to planets with red suns to get drunk. Okay? Supergirl was a role model for girls around the world. Has been for generations. This is not a role model I want any girl to mimic. Okay? I don't know what they were thinking. No, I really don't. Of why they did this. Now, I can kind of see where they're going with this. I think what they're doing here is they're making it so that she watched Krypton be destroyed as she was leaving Argo City. Okay? And it messed with her to the point where it's caused PTSD. I can see that. But there were much better ways to do it than the first introduction of Supergirl being of her being stone drunk, wearing a trench coat over her superhero outfit. Okay? And I don't understand why people ain't up in arms about this. Because if they could do that to Supergirl, what are they going to do to Wonder Woman? What are they going to do to Zatanna? What are they going to do to Black Canary? I get where they were going with it, okay? I personally think they were going with the whole idea that she was there when Krypton exploded. And as she left in her ship, she watched it and it kind of caused PTSD, okay? I completely see that, okay? But our first appearance of her in this new DC movie universe should not be of her drunk, staggering into the Fortress of Solitude to collect crypto, and for 5 seconds later, Superman saying, yeah, she goes to planets with red suns because that's the only place where she can get drunk. It should not be that. They could have found a better way to do that, and people should be, and especially fans of Superman and Supergirl and comic books in general, should be really angry they did it that way. Okay? And really, I don't see any way for them to retcon this. I really don't see any way for them to retcon this. If they're able to retcon this somehow, I would be amazed. I literally would be amazed. But I really don't see a way for them to retcon this. Okay? And I could kind of see where they're going with it. Okay? They're going to make it out to where she had PTSD and she's got to kind of, you know, learn how to be a hero and all this other stuff. But our first image of her should not be borderline blackout drunk, staggering into the Fortress of Solitude while Superman's being healed. Okay, it just shouldn't. Alright? They could have done it better ways. Okay? And really, if they can do that to Supergirl, what are they going to do to Batgirl? What are they going to do to Wonder Woman? What are they going to do to Zatanna? What are they going to do to Black Canary? It really does call into question what other changes are they going to make to these other DC heroes. Finally, I want to talk about Krypto. And really, I want to talk about Krypto and the Justice Gang, okay? This is Superman's movie, okay? The most iconic scenes in this movie should feature Superman, alright? Superman's fights should be better than those of the Justice Gang, than those of Krypto. They're not. The best scenes, the best action scenes of the movie involve either the Justice Gang or Krypto. It shouldn't be that way. Now, this ain't a big pet peeve of mine. I get it. But it almost seemed like they had too many things they were trying to do with this movie. Okay? It really seemed that way. And while this does not make me as mad as, say, you know, them altering the message with his crib and his ship, or what the way they did Supergirl, it's still bad when the best scenes in the movie are of the Justice Gang or with Krypto. Not when it's just Superman alone fighting. Are there a couple of good scenes? Yeah. But they don't come up to the level of the Justice Gang or Krypto's scenes. Okay? They just don't. Alright? I mean, really. This doesn't really get to me as much as the first two things I talked about. But it's still there. And I still felt that Superman should have had the best scenes instead of the Justice Gang and Crypto having some of the best scenes, whether they be comedic or action oriented. So, in conclusion, I want to say this. How you come to this movie will determine whether or not you like it. And what I mean by that is this. If you came to this movie as just a movie fan, wanting to see a good superhero movie, you can get that here, okay? There is some good things in this movie, okay? If you came here as a Superman fan, you are going to leave either extremely disappointed or just flat out angry. To be honest with you, I'm somewhere in between angry and disappointed, okay? Like I said before, this movie was not as bad as I thought it would be. I thought this movie was going to be horrible because I heard so much about it online. Were there some good things about this movie? Yes. But the way they did Superman, the way they did Supergirl, and the fact about Crypto and the Justice Gang having the best scenes in the movie really did bring the score of this movie down a lot. If they had not done what they did with Superman, if they had not done what they did with Supergirl, okay, this movie would have gotten a much higher score. If the only thing wrong they did was the Crypto and the Justice Gang stuff, okay, this movie would have been a great movie. But because they did what they did with Supergirl and Superman, I have to give this movie a low score. A real low score. So in conclusion, what score do I give Superman 2025? The first in what's supposed to be a new DC movie universe. Taking into account everything, whether you're talking about the good acting, the good balance between action and comedy, as well as the bad stuff of what they did with Superman and Supergirl, and also the Crypto and Justice Gang scenes. I have to give this movie a 4. I have no intention of watching this movie again. No intention. Now look, if they can somehow retcon what they did with Superman and Supergirl, I might come back to it. And that would be a whole lot easier with Superman than it would be with Supergirl, okay? But just the way they did Superman in this movie, the way they did Supergirl in this movie, and the fact that some of the best scenes, most of the best scenes, included either Crypto or the Justice Gang, I have to give this movie a 4. I have no intention of watching it again. And to be quite honest, I was on the verge of giving this movie a 2, which would be the worst score I've ever given a movie before. But after watching it a couple of times, a lot of the action and comedy and just the overall acting scenes grew on me. But still, it's the way they did Supergirl. It's the way they did Superman. It's the fact that Crypto and the Justice Gang have some of the best scenes in the movie when it should be Superman. Okay? I have to give it a 4. I did not like this movie. And to me, this movie is so bad, it really calls into question the rest of the DC universe and what they do next with those characters and how they're going to change those characters. And I am sincerely disappointed in James Gunn and David Zaslav doing what they did with Superman and Supergirl in particular. If they had not done those two things, this would have gotten a much higher score. But those two things alone brought the score down so much. Okay? I could have lived with Crypto and the Justice Gang having some of the best scenes in the movie. I could have lived with that. But what they did to Superman, Supergirl, no. That went way out of bounds for me, and I just did not like this movie whatsoever. So really, outside of the few saving graces of the Justice Gang and the some of the Easter eggs from the DC universe and just some of the good balance they have between action and comedy, I give it a 4. If they didn't have those things, this would have gotten a 1, in my opinion. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was my movie review of Superman 2025. I did not give it a good score. I gave it a 4 out of 10 stars. And I hope you guys did enjoy this movie review. Go over to my Rumble and my YouTube pages and check out some of my other videos. Over there, I got book reviews, I got video game playthroughs, I got geek reports, as well as special commentary. I will see you guys in the next video and in the next stream. Laters.
Thank you for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please check out my YouTube and Rumble pages for more of my content, which includes more reviews, gaming, and geek news. I will see you in the next video and the next stream. Laters.